So welcome everybody who's just coming in. I went ahead and got started. I had no idea there was going to be a flood as soon as I did that. But I'm Beth Carroll and we're rolling because I've got a lot to cover. Okay, this one gets a little bit, if any of you guys in here are really math geeky, you're going to like this one. So it's driven off of sales compensation. So I said at the beginning, my background is sales comp. This graph is really more applicable for sales roles, but it works also for piece rate type plans. And what we're talking about here are largely piece rates. So whether you're talking about by the mile, or by the case, or by what's being selected in a warehouse, you can still use this same methodology. So what I'm showing you right now would be a flat piece rate, okay? I'm showing it as a 3.5% commission, so commission to a salesperson. Some of you do have salespeople in here. So commission to a salesperson is where they're paid a percentage of revenue or a percentage of the margin, okay? Piece rate is kind of like a commission, right? They're getting something for everything that they do, right? So it's very commission-like, it's just you're not phrasing it as a percentage of revenue or a percentage of margin, you're phrasing it as 36 cents per mile. It actually really is kind of a commission. So this is what that looks like if it's just a flat rate, if it never changes. If you want to make it more interesting, you can put in tiers or stair steps into it so that when they get to a higher level of productivity, they get a higher rate for all that they did in that time period, okay? Typically for you guys, we'd be talking weekly, right? So you'd be measuring them within a week in terms of how much they did in that time period, and if they got to a higher level of productivity, they would get a higher per whatever it is you're counting rate back to the first dollar. Okay, so this is a way to create some real differentiation between your top performers and your average performers. You're going to want to look at your statistics very carefully, and you're going to want to understand what the typical distribution is. The wonderful thing is you guys have statistics like crazy, right? You track everything. So you can look at that and you can see what the typical selector rate is for a weekly period, and you can say, okay, our top 10% performer is landing here, so that's where we want to make the real sweet spot. Then we've got a couple other gradations down here, and our bottom 10%, we want to make it pretty painful if they're staying there, right? So we want to take some money away or not have as much of a rate increase for them. So this actually does work for both drivers and warehouse workers to do a retroactive commission rate. Now for those of you that have sales caps on, the better thing to do for salespeople is actually what I call a marginal commission rate. Okay, so marginal is like taxes. You get the higher commission rate, but it's only on the dollars within the bucket. It doesn't go back to the first dollar. Now this is better for sales reps because you're typically talking about a longer time horizon. You're not talking about a week, right, that something's happening in. You're talking about a month or a quarter. You're probably also talking about bigger dollar values that you're dealing with here for them. And you're talking about workers that may potentially have the ability to game the system. I'll put it nicely. You would never do that, right? Game the system in terms of the contract or whatever it is you're tracking. So the stair-step rate for these kinds of workers can be dangerous because typically what it will do is for one additional dollar that they bring in whatever time period you're measuring, there's usually a bigger payback to them and it can be in the thousands. This is actually a contributing factor to why our mortgage industry blew up in 2008 because mortgage brokers had retroactive commission rates, and so they were encouraged, in fact rewarded, for padding the loan packages to put as much loan volume into their portfolio as possible because it would kick them over a tier, and then they would get that higher commission rate on all of the loan volume that they wrote in that period. And for them, we're not talking a couple $1,000s here, right? When they kicked it over that next tier, that usually meant $10, $20, $30, $50,000 more in their pocket. So they had every reason to cheat, absolutely every reason. So for more high value, high dollar roles, I would go with a marginal commission rate where you're only paying that higher rate on the dollars in the bucket. It removes the incentive to cheat, right? You're not getting that higher rate back to the first dollar. It's just on the next dollar that they sell. But for the roles that we're talking about in terms of drivers and warehouse workers, very short time horizon. They're going to be going back and forth week to week to week, right? So one week they're gonna be up here, another week they're gonna be down here. You don't nearly have as much risk, and God help you trying to explain a marginal rate to warehouse workers or drivers. I've tried it, it doesn't work. So you can't, and your recruiters can't explain it to them either. Retroactive is very easy to understand.